My dear friends, today I am taking the second question of paper K6001, object of the interpretation of statute. My dear friends, the interpretation of the statute is a very important question. In first video, I explain the meaning of interpretation of statute, and I want to explain again meaning of interpretation of statute means the interpretation of statute is very necessary if and only if there are two conditions. If the language of the statute is clear or not ambiguous or unambiguous, then there is no need of interpretation. If the language of the statute is not clear, then there is a need of interpretation. So my dear friends, these are the two conditions. If the language of the interpretation, if the language of the statute is clear, there is no need of interpretation. If the language of the statute is not clear or ambiguous, then there is a need of interpretation. So the object of the interpretation of the statute is to ascertain the intention of the legislation through a particular statute. Such ascertainment helps in the understanding of the real sense of the complicated facts of customary law, regulation, contract law, will, etc. It was said that interpretation, in other words, is construction or vice versa. It is one of the basic requirements of the interpretation that when the words of the statute are clear and unambiguous, the question of construction of words used therein shall not arise, because such words ordinarily speak for themselves. So, my dear friends, according to a jurist Maxwell, it can be said that the main object of all interpretation of a statute is to determine what intention is conveyed either expressly or impliedly by the language used, as far as is necessary for determining whether the particular case or state of facts presented to the interpreter falls within. My dear friends, the object of the interpretation of the statute is, if the language of the statute is not clear, then it is the duty of the court to determine or to assess or to check the language of the statute. If the language is clear, there is no need of interpretation. If the language is not clear, then there is a need of interpretation. My dear friends, there are three things for the interpretation. First, literal form. Second, grammatical form. Third, the intention of the legislature. My dear friends, if the language of the statute is not clear, then we have to see, or we have to consider, or we have to take the meaning of that, the language of the statute, according to the words used in the statute. Their meaning should be taken as it is, as they are used in statute. The language of the statute should be grammatically checked. We have to consider the language according to the grammar or meaning of the word according to the grammar. We have to consider. Or most important aspect is third. My dear friends, when the statute is made, in the statute, the intention of the legislature is inherited. It means we have to, or you can say, intention of the legislature is very essential to be taken into consideration when the statute is interpreted. So, the interpretation of the statute, or you can say, object of the interpretation of the statute is how the statute is interpreted, or the meaning of the statute should be according to the intention of the legislature. So, my dear friends, in interpretation, there are three things: little form, grammatical form, third, intention of the legislature. If the language is not clear, then there is a need of interpretation of the statutes. Or interpretation should be according to the intention of the legislature, and words used in the statutes or the language, we have to correct grammar. So, grammatically, words must be checked, or the meaning of the statute must be according to the intention of the legislature. So, my dear friend, this is the interpretation of the statute. So, in the last, I want to make a request to you, please subscribe the channel. The name Mess by Singh Dabas. Please subscribe the channel. I am making request again to you. Thanks.